If you go back to about a year ago on my channel, you will find me avidly proclaiming that raw performance of an aircraft is not going to constitute the meta at top tier. This was true with the F4E, this was true with things like the EJ Kai, and I even said this when the MLD came out. Insert update Silver Lions, Wayne Lions, and you have the Kfir C7. This plane has absolutely unmatched performance compared to anything else in the entire game. It is actually quite literally untouchable at 11.3 even, yet it's really not that effective in a typical ARB game. Why? Well, we're going to get into it a little bit in this video, but I also want to just point out that the Kefir C7 is not nearly as bad as people are making it out to be. It is entirely true that AIM-9G's 4 of them as your only missiles at 11.3 is kind of a lackluster loadout. Well, not kind of, it really is a lackluster loadout. It is also true that if you're not that great at top tier jets, that you are not going to enjoy this plane. This is the type of aircraft that you want to fly if you've been playing top tier for a really long time, you've tried out just about everything there is to try out, and the Kefir C7 is going to be a completely new playstyle and something you have never seen before. Now, if you've watched other content creators' videos, you would be like, well, Mr. Headseeker, what are you talking about? The Kefir C7 is nothing more than a Fox 2 only plane that turns really good and bleeds speed really hard and doesn't have pulse Doppler and accelerates really quickly. And you're not necessarily wrong at all. But what people aren't emphasizing enough is just how absolutely insane the raw performance of this engine is. I have personally watched many videos now on the Kefir C7 with people telling you not to climb in this plane, stay at low altitude, or you're, quote, just going to be sparrow food. And I am very disappointed when I hear things like this because it's going to really lock away the full potential of the Kefir C7 for players who look to these content creators for good information about the game and are going to play the planes accordingly. Now, I am by no means trying to make the claim that I am a perfect YouTuber, I'm the best at War Thunder, and everybody should listen to me. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that I do feel like some of the videos on the Kefir were a little bit rushed. I think people were trying a little bit too hard to be first, to actually make content on it. And therefore, there has been a very big misunderstanding and as far as what the Kefir is actually capable of. Just because you don't have a radar or Fox 1 semi-active radar homing missiles, that just doesn't mean that you don't belong at altitude and you're going to immediately die to sparrows. Now, previously, I would completely agree with that statement because, well, when you're at high altitude, most planes are going to be sparrow food if they don't have a means of fighting back. The Kefir, on the other hand, is a completely different story. I have never seen an absolute fucking rocket like the Kefir. Taking this plane up to 4,000 to 6,000 meters altitude is going to make your plane easily capable of Mach 1.4 to 1.5, and yes, pretty much every jet is capable of those speeds. In actuality, you never actually seem to get to those speeds in combat just because your plane doesn't accelerate fast enough. The Kefir, on the other hand, will get to that speed in no time. If you put this thing in level flight for just a couple of seconds, you'll be at 1.4 in no time. And at these speeds, at that altitude, sparrows cannot touch you. That is, of course, if you know how to kinematically, I think that's the right way to say it, defeat a sparrow. Now I'm going to get into some specific maneuvers you can do to actually defend against these sparrows at high altitude and high speed, and I just want to drive home the point throughout this entire video. What you're going to see me do in the Kefir is be at very high altitude, be at extremely high speeds, speeds that nothing in the game has been able to achieve, even the MiG-23 MLD. The Kefir out-accelerates the MiG-23 MLD at high altitude, at high speeds, at supersonic speed, for example. The MiG-23 MLD was the fastest accelerating plane past Mach 1 in the entire game. That is completely not the case anymore. The Kefir will leave it in the dust. The Kefir is also going to leave pretty much everything in the dust on low speeds too. It's got acceleration pretty much as good, if not better, than the FGR-2 Phantom, and though it might appear the FG is a little bit faster, it's just because you're taking off on the runway. The 0 to air time on the FG is going to be faster than the Kefir, but I am like 90% positive that the Kfir has even better acceleration 0 to Mach 1 than the FG Phantom. You have the best low speed acceleration in the entire game, you have the best high speed acceleration in the entire game by a significant margin, and on top of that, your plane literally picks up speed in a 55-degree climb. I'm shitting you not, try it. By keeping the Kfir at low altitude, you are getting almost none of the uses out of having such significant speed and energy advantages. At Mach 1.45, 6,000 meters, like I said, a Sparrow absolutely cannot touch you if you can actually kinematically defend against incoming missiles. I'm going to again show you how to do that later in the video. Now it is entirely true, however, and I will concede to the point that though the Kfir may be untouchable, like I am going to repeatedly claim throughout this video, it doesn't do too much touching, if that makes sense. It's got 4 AIM-9Gs, and it is the Fox 1 meta, where flares are very strong. If somebody sees your missile coming, you're probably not going to get a kill. On top of that, 2 Defas are not very good guns. They are a step above something like the GSH-23 in my opinion, but they still have some pretty damn low muzzle velocity, making them more difficult to aim than something like the Vulcan or the Colt gun pods or the guns on the F5C. You name it, there's a lot of better guns out there at 11.3 than the Defas. Not only do they have pretty poor ballistics, but I also find them to be critical hit machines. I rarely ever get one burst kills with these 30mm regardless of what belts I'm using, so be prepared to just crit somebody and then your teammate ends up finishing off the kill. It's going to happen a lot, but at the very least you can do some damage with them. Now back to the AIM-9Gs. Previously, at least at the time of me recording this, the Kfir has a radar. Now about halfway through me gaining clips to make this video, they removed the Kfir's radar. And a lot of people that aren't too experienced in jets might not see this as a big deal. You know, the Kfir doesn't have any Fox 1 missiles, it doesn't really need a radar. Well, yeah, you're not wrong, but at the same time, it was very nice to have because look at the seeker cone, or field of view, I guess, of the same 9G where that seeker head can be moving around in. If you don't lock the thing that you want to lock, you are going to have a hell of a time actually getting this missile off and relocking in time before you have to disengage. Having the radar allows you to slave the seeker head of the AIM-9G onto whatever it is you want to lock. So let's say somebody flares, your seeker locks the flare, and now what do? You're going to either have to turn off the missile and turn it back on again, or you can slave the seeker to the radar. So if you can manage to get the radar locked on to the target you want, you will not have to deal with trying to maneuver the field of view of that seeker head around and unlock whatever it is you're locked onto, or turning off the missile. It was very handy, very useful, and albeit it's not the end of the world that it's gone, it is kind of unfortunate. I think it actually made it a little bit better despite how realistic it was. I'm sad to see it go, but nonetheless, like I said, we'll make do. It's not the end of the world. Still on the topic of AIM-9Gs, while they are only Fox 2 missiles, you don't get any of the fancy Fox 1 SAR missiles that you see, like Skyflashes, E2s, AIM-7s, R-24s. Those are all very, very nice to have and kind of meta-defining weapons. However, if you're not going to have Fox 1s, I am going to stand by the fact that the AIM-9G is going to be the best IR missile that you can possibly have at top tier. Again, we're in the flare meta where if somebody sees you launching a Fox 2 missile at them, you're simply not going to get a kill with it. So the best way to get kills, in my opinion, is to be able to launch missiles and decrease the odds of them seeing you launch it as much as possible. While it's kind of contradictory because the AIM-9G has a very long burn time, that missile marker is going to stay on screen for a very long time, it also means that it has some very cracked range for a Fox 2 missile. You can use these AIM-9Gs as pretty much budget R-24s in that I have killed people from 6 kilometers away by doing my Mach 1.4 6,000 meter strat, and I'm going to show you very specific examples of that throughout this video. With the way I fly the Kfir, and in my opinion the way that the Kfir gets the most out of the aircraft's performance, the AIM-9G is going to be the best weapon possible for this plane besides having Fox 1 missiles. And I'm going to make that at least try to make it very clear throughout these clips. You can see me up here at very high altitude, Mach 1.4. It's not like I was putting this plane in a straight line for 2 minutes, AFK'd, and waited for me to get up to speed like you would have to in most aircraft. The Kfir gets to this speed very easily, and it gets to this altitude very easily, something completely unprecedented at top tier, and again, I do not see anybody making actual use of this. That was about a 5-kilometer launch there on the AIM-9G on that Phantom, who was above me and closing on me, so it's not like it was a super far range launch. However, the AIM-9G and its massive field of view allows you to pull some pretty nutty lead, as well as the fact that AIM-9Gs do not have a maximum overload during launch like you see in a lot of other missiles, pretty much every other missile actually. So what that means is if you're pulling really hard, you're pulling Gs, and you try to get a missile off, and then you see that it says maximum overload somewhere on the bottom of your screen, launch denied, something like that. The AIM-9G does not have that. You can pull as hard as you want with an AIM-9G and launch the missile, and it will come off the rail no problem. And with that ginormous field of view for the seeker head, that can come in real handy. Even though it only pulls 18G, you can get some pretty extensive lead in there in a very short amount of time due to it not having any maximum G overload during launch and having a very wide field of view. Now you see this F4E right there, he launched something at me, I don't know what it was, but you saw just how easily it was for me to brush that missile off. I didn't drop any countermeasures, I simply used my speed and my altitude, and I out-energied that missile, and you're going to be out-energizing missiles a lot in the Kfir, more so than you've ever seen in War Thunder. Diving down, Mach 1.28, 2,000 meters, I am going to pop the air brakes. I'm going to start cutting throttle a little bit because I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to rip. I just know that if it says reduce speed for too long, then my wings will inevitably snap. So we get some shots in with the F4, or to the F4EJ. I'm not the best shot with DEFAs. I'm not too experienced with them in top tier. There's not a lot of top tier planes that have them, so the lead at top tier is going to be a little bit different than where I've played DEFAs previously, and that's going to be apparent throughout this video as my shooting is not the best. F4E launches a Sparrow at me. I'm kind of 90 degrees right there in that Sparrow launch, so I'm able to chaff that one away from me, pull some massive AOA, bleed as much speed as I need to stay out of his guns. And that's the thing about the Kfir, it does bleed speed very hard at subsonic speeds, but it gains speed back very, very quickly at all speeds. So all you have to do is just not pull too hard or put too much input into the controls. You saw me as I pulled up for this F4E, I kind of started out smooth, very smooth and gradual mouse inputs as to not bleed a whole lot of energy, until I saw that I was completely committed to the vertical, and then I pulled very hard, got a lot of AOA to get my guns on target, and again, the DEFAs are kind of crit machines. Not the best shooting there by me, but still I do feel like he ate a little bit much 30mm when you see things like the Vulcan in the game. But nonetheless, that's just a little bit of digression. Let's move on into the next game. Actually, let's not move on to the next game. I'm going to show you right here just what I'm talking about, the performance of the Kfir. Again, it accelerates insanely fast, it climbs insanely well, and it gets up to very high Mach speeds very quickly. I just wanted to throw this clip in here just to show you how much of a fucking rocket this jet is, and how easily it is to get to high altitude and get to these high speeds that you see me constantly playing at in the Kfir. Again, I am not going out of my way, side climbing around the map for 5 minutes and letting my plane fly in a straight line to get to Mach 1.4 in this plane. It happens very easily, and it is something that you really, really need to take into consideration when playing this plane, because again, as I'm going to show you, Sparrows absolutely cannot touch you at these speeds. So I think we should go ahead and look at some of these defensive Sparrow maneuvers I keep alluding to, so that we can actually know what I'm talking about. Now, first and foremost, this clip, very buggy, very ugly, I know, bear with me, this is the only clip that looks like this. And also, big shout out to Hamburger600, Bearcut, I think that's how you pronounce your name in Discord. He's in my Discord, and he helped me out with this. Now, you saw I didn't really put too much effort into that. I simply went into a shallow dive and did kind of an aileron and barrel roll at the same time. Now, if you use just ailerons, this can work, but it's even more effective if you input some rudder in there too. This is the AIM-7F, by the way, from the F4J, and it is the easiest missile to do this against, but nonetheless, you can do this against the Dogfight E2s and Skyflash as well. I just figured that I'd do the AIM-7F because that's the missile everybody's going to be raving about now that it's been introduced into the game, and there's going to be a lot of misconceptions and misinformation about the AIM-7F. I personally prefer the Skyflash. Take that for whatever it's worth. Now you see, that was kind of a side aspect launch. As long as I can keep the Sparrow pulling lead the entire time it's in flight, it will never touch me. I'm Mach 1.4 just like I am typically in random battle games, and 5,000 meters. Again, this is not any scripted speed or altitude. I did not cherry pick these speeds or altitude. The Kfir can do this easily. You can get up to these speeds and altitude easily. And if somebody launches a sparrow at you from this altitude, if it's named 7F, all you have to do is keep the missile leading the entire time it's in flight. If you let the missile pull lead before you start maneuvering, then you're pretty much screwed. So you have to just make sure that you're either jamming the weapon employment zone and keeping the range close, or if not, then you have to just make sure that the missile stays leading. As far as sky flashes and sparrows, E2 sparrows go, they are significantly easier in my opinion. They're only more difficult in head-ons, but the head-on defensive maneuver I showed you there in the custom is going to work the same for the dogfight sparrows. However, if somebody shoots you with an E2 from say 6 o'clock or anywhere behind you, it is significantly easier to dodge them, and they have significantly less range. So what do you do if it's an R24 or a Skyflash or an E2 Sparrow and it's not a head-on launch? Well, you simply just fly away from it, and it's really that simple. If somebody launches a Skyflash, R24, whatever it may be, not one of those super long-range missiles like the AIM-7F, if they launch that outside of say 3.5 kilometers while you're going Mach 1.4, there is absolutely zero chance that that missile is going to hit you, as long as you do a little bit of cranking, very minor cranking, just kind of wiggling your plane left to right very gradually, and you're going to bleed the missile of its energy, and it's simply not going to catch you. The Kfir is just too fast, and it holds energy too well at high speeds. If you're having a problem keeping high speeds at high altitude, try just tapping your elevators when you're making turns. Don't do a full input and hold down the key. All you want to do is tap the key so that you make sure you're keeping speed but also kind of turning at the same time. So that's kind of how the plane is invincible. I am going to show more examples of it throughout the video, but for right now I want to talk about what I do to be offensive. And there's, well, one side note, that's a Skyflash right there, and I did that little Baileron roll thingy at high speeds. It simply cannot hit you when you do that. That's a very consistent maneuver. It's not a one-time thing. If you want to replicate that maneuver on your own, I encourage you to do so. It is a very good maneuver to dodge a head-on sparrow. But of course, keep in mind that you have to at least be going supersonic for the duration of that maneuver for it to work. Anyways, as I was saying, with the offensive capability, what I do is I stay very high, very fast, and I launch these AIM-9Gs at people from very far away. Now at the most I'm going to do is probably 6.5 kilometers with the AIM-9G. It just depends on what kind of speeds I'm at and where the enemy is flying for me to do a missile launch of that distance. Here we go, more sparrows being launched at me. Actually that may have been an AIM-9J. But nonetheless, this guy is going to launch a bunch of sparrows at me and I'm going to completely ignore them. So I guess I'll wait on talking about the AIM-9G a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit more about the sparrows and being defensive with sparrows being launched at me. You can see just how quickly I'm picking up speed and picking up altitude because this plane's performance is absolutely ridiculous. If this plane had better missiles, it would be undoubtedly the most broken jet I've ever seen added to War Thunder. If this thing was even carrying as much as 2 Skyflashes and 2 IR missiles, I would never fly anything else ever again. So there we go, an E2 launch, and I simply just kind of turn a little bit. I wait for that rocket motor to fully burn out, and once it's gliding, I just give it a little turn. He's not that far away. Now granted, it is 6 o'clock, so 4 kilometers is decently far, but you can make 4 kilometer shots with the Skyflash depending on the situation. However, if somebody's going Mach 1.3 and you make a 4 kilometer rear aspect shot, that Skyflash is simply never going to hit. However, when I kind of stopped paying attention here, I tried too hard to get a kill. I should have been full defensive. Not only that, but my AIM-9G seeker glitched and it kind of just locked onto the ground. That happens a lot with IR missiles in this game, not sure why. But since I stopped paying attention to the F4E, I did end up eating a sparrow, but that's the fault of me and not the fault of the Kfir. I could have easily dodged that had I not been too worried about getting a kill. Now I have been saying throughout the entire video that the Kfir is invincible, and I stand by that. However, that does not mean you're not going to die. You're probably going to die kind of frequently in this plane. I don't have a very high win rate personally. I have about a 60% win rate in the Kfir, which is pretty much my lowest win rate in any top tier jet. And I think that's simply just because I myself am not able to fully impact a game like I would normally in a carry plane like say an EJ Kai or an FG Phantom. As a result, my teams tend to lose a little bit more often than they otherwise would, just because I'm not really doing too many very impactful plays in a given match. Now, whether or not that's a viable reason or excuse for you to not use this playstyle, maybe you want to be a little bit more aggressive at lower altitude, lower speeds, and maybe try to pull a win out of your ass, then go for it, man. I'm not saying that my way of playing is going to give you the best results possible. I'm just saying that the Kfir is objectively an invincible aircraft when you put it at these speeds in this altitude. Combine that with the fact that you have some very long range IR missiles. You can shoot at people from that are basically down at the deck from really high altitude and really long range reliably. Like I said, I typically get 4 kilometer, 5 kilometer AIM-9G kills when I'm going as fast as I am in this plane. Remember, the faster you're going at the time of launching the missile, the more range the missile is going to have, because it's not only going to reach the speeds that the motor is going to allow it to reach, but it's coming off of the rail at whatever speed you're already traveling. So if I'm traveling at Mach 1.4, my missiles already get to be Mach 1.4 before that motor even kicks on. So the faster you're going, the more range you're going to have. That's all I'm going to say on that. And of course, occasionally throughout the video, you are going to see me dipping down to lower altitudes like you see right here, trying to get some missile kills. I'll only do this if I feel like it's safe, or if a lot of the enemy team has already been killed. Then of course I am not too worried about defending against missiles or trying to optimize my speed, because the Kfir can bleed speed and gain speed at will. Now, I will say that in a sustained dogfight, the Kfir is not going to beat, say, the MiG-23 MLD. However, the Kfir never has to get into a sustained dogfight. It can leave whenever the hell it wants. It can fight whenever the hell it wants. It's the fastest plane in the game, and it gets faster than anything in the game. So if you find yourself in a losing scenario with the Kfir, just ditch out of the fight and put it in a straight line. You're going to out-accelerate pretty much everything, and you're certainly going to out-accelerate everything at high speeds. If that's not enough, start climbing while you're out-accelerating everything. Your climb rate is absolutely nuts, and you're going to gain speed that much quicker the more altitude you get underneath you. I cannot overstate the performance of this plane. The engine is absolutely cracked. You need to be using it. At least I really think you should be using it to get the most out of the plane. There is no other plane in the game that can get to Mach 1.4 every single game in every single situation you can possibly get in, other than the Kfir. The other planes have to be just flying in a straight line at high altitude for a very long time to actually get to the speeds that the Kfir can in the matter of seconds. Of course, you can turn fight, and you can bleed as much speed as you want in order to stay behind people to turn fight. I often do find myself in situations where I am dogfighting people. But my primary tactic through the beginning and the middle of the game is to basically play like an F-104. Fly in a straight line only, use your speed, kinematically defeat missiles, and that's pretty much it. Once there's little players left on the enemy team, or you're not too worried about high altitude threats anymore, then yes, I do recommend going down, of course, and trying to make the most use out of your turn fighting, speed bleeding Delta Wayne beast. But of course, as I have stated several times throughout the video, as well as everybody else has actually said this in their videos, is that you're not going to be doing a whole lot of damage with the Kfir. Again, 4 AIM-9Gs, 2 Defas, it's not the most offensive loadout at top tier. However, if there's at least one thing that this plane is good for, it's baiting the shit out of sparrows. If you can get people to just dump their missiles at you, like I do throughout this video, then you are going to at least put your team at a very significant advantage without actually getting any kills. It's not uncommon for you to easily dodge 4 or 5 sparrows in a game if you're playing at high altitude and high speed, and note the defensive maneuvers that I had shown earlier in the video. Of course, the plane has countermeasures. It has a relatively low amount of countermeasures, but it is completely made up for in the fact that you really don't need countermeasures that often. The only time you really are going to need them is if somebody has gotten the jump on you, you didn't know that they were already there, and you kind of just have to panic countermeasures out because they're shooting a missile at you within 2 kilometers. Now that is the exception, but that doesn't happen all that often. Wasn't a whole lot of gameplay commentary in this video. I apologize if that's what you watch me for. I will probably put out some kind of commentary on the Kfir in the future to kind of explain what I'm doing, what I'm thinking while I'm doing it, but for now I just wanted to expose this side of the Kfir. One thing I don't like about this plane though is that if you're at low altitude, you can go fast enough and pull hard enough to just rip your wings with or without boosters. So if you want to take boosters, go ahead. If you don't want to take boosters, that's fine too. You're going to rip either way in the same scenarios. It's just having boosters will make it easier than not having boosters. So with that being said, that's pretty much it for the video. I'm just going to leave this clip up right here because I think it's absolutely hilarious and it completely embodies what the Kfir really is when flown at its optimal setting, high altitude, high speed. Anyways, I'm just going to leave this clip here, let it roll out. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from the video. And most importantly, I hope I'll see you on the next one. See ya.